Hi, everyone. This is Ken Caldwell. I'm Dean of the School of Business Administration at University of Houston, Victoria. And I'm joined here today by Dr. Peggy Cloninger, who is a professor in our management department. Dr. Cloninger has a range of research and teaching interests, and she has published articles in several prestigious journals, including the Journal of Vocational Behavior, International Journal of Human Resource Management, Personnel Review, Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, and the Journal of International Management. And she's going to talk today about her favorite courses to teach. So, Dr. Cloninger, what is your favorite class to teach and why?
Well, that's an easy one for me. My favorite classes are always the business and society classes, both at the graduate level and the undergraduate level. These are my favorite classes because they focus on social responsibility and on ethics. And I also teach strategy, and I've taught general management, and these are very important, as are all the classes that we teach, to running any department, or you have to know these principles. But at the same time, it's been my experience through reading for 20 or 30 years now, that irresponsible or improper decisions, poor ethical decisions, can actually have a bigger effect on a company than a bad strategy, a poor strategic decision. They affect the company, the workers, the communities, and I think people don't often think about that. Some students come in, they think, I'm here to make money, right? But you realize you're really doing a service. Business is a service, and how you perform that service has such a huge impact on so many. One of the most famous examples here, of course, is Enron. Everybody around this area knows about Enron. The collapse happened a little while after I became a professor here. And in my classes at that time, I had students who'd lost jobs because they were affected either working in the company or related companies. They lost their homes, or they had family or friends who had lost that. And 20 or 30 years later, I still read about people who lost all of their retirement savings and are struggling to make ends meet. And this whole collapse was because they made a lot of poor decisions. A very few number of people, a small number of people at the top, made some unethical accounting decisions. They started maybe in the gray area, and then they went straight over, and they wound up being illegal. And after a number of years, some people went to prison, including the former CEO, Jeffrey Skilling. He was in for 12 years. And as a matter of fact, he was just released last year. But none of those things, going to prison, doesn't make up for all the people that are hurt, these bad decisions that they made. At the time that this happened, in addition to all the people losing their jobs, there were all these extraneous costs from this behavior. The Astros, for example, didn't want to play at Enron Field. And they had to pay about $1 million to get the naming rights back. The name Enron was on the stadium, and the tickets and the napkins and the uniforms. And all those things had to be redone at a great expense. And even, I remember at the time, the local communities had to pay about $100,000 to remake signs going to Enron Field. So people don't always realize how this collapse ripples through the entire society in so many ways, and how the repercussions can go on for many, many years for many people. So in these classes, we go through dozens of cases, and good and bad, and we see how these decisions matter and how easy sometimes it is for a company to slide into them. We had a speaker a couple of years ago who had a degree in accounting, and she was gradually asked to do little things that seemed little. And then all her bosses, according to her story, was they veered away, and she wound up holding the bag because it became illegal decisions, and she went to prison. And she came and spoke to our students one year, and she says, it's really tough to explain to my kids I can't vote because I'm a felon, you know? So I think what I tell students, these are your chances to think about how would you act in all these different cases? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? Because here it's a safe environment. You learn, and then hopefully you will take all these stories, because I think people remember stories, they remember cases, they may forget the principle or the name of the theory, but they remember the stories, and they take those with them. And I still hear from people today, and even when I'm teaching the classes, that I had a case just like that, or we just had something just like that. Or they'll email me 2 or 3 years later, can you send me that video? Right? So, and it's very gratifying. So I really enjoy that class.
Well, hopefully you are educating a new generation of more ethical decision makers. But what these decision makers are doing as they get through our program, Peggy, is they're entering a very challenging business environment that we're facing. What do you believe are some of the challenges that are facing businesses today?
Well, I think there's a lot of challenges that are going on right now. I think you and I chatted, kind of emailed about this a while back. In a way, we're going through a mass extinction of businesses. There's so much change in the business environment, and it causes a lot of social unrest. Many businesses are going out of business. Many people lose their jobs even before the recession. And sometimes you're looking for who to blame. And oftentimes it's not anybody to blame. It might be robotics. People don't always realize, like in manufacturing, it's only about 9% our labor costs. It's very low. And a lot of people think, oh, America doesn't make anything anymore. Actually, we make more than we've ever made before. We're really a manufacturing giant. We tend to think, oh, it's all overseas. No, it's right here. But you don't need many people who are involved in labor. I had visited the Rouge factory of a car company up near Detroit a couple of years ago. It's one of the few factories you can go in and take a tour. And as you're seeing the line, in some places you see that this is all computers. You know, there are people working, but then some things, like the windshields, are all put on with this giant computer. Pop, and it pops it right in, lines it up perfectly, and it's like that, and it's done. So you see that as you go through the line and you see how these vehicles are put together. So it's very interesting. So I think there's a lot of stresses on business right now before this, or certainly on employees. Right now, of course, COVID-19 has turned everything on its head, right? We're changing the way we live. We are rediscovering who is really an essential worker. And a lot of times it's not me, it's not you. It is the people who deliver your groceries, right? Who are driving the trucks to get you the groceries. It's certainly not the hedge fund managers, right? And yet we see that a lot of those people don't make a great deal of money. One of the cases I've used in the last year or so is about a guy named Dan Price, which goes into one of the things I always like to teach my students is to remember that what they do really matters. And as a manager, aside from all these effects that they might have, and Dan Price owns a small company, well, it's not that small anymore, called Gravity Payments, based in Seattle. And a few years ago, he was a millionaire already, had $1 million salary, paying himself very well, a couple of homes, living very well. And he realized that his employees weren't. He wasn't paying them very much. And he realized he wasn't paying them really enough to live in the area where they worked. So they had to commute a long way. They just didn't have really a living wage for that area. So he went in and he decided, I'm going to change everybody's salary and make the minimum salary $70,000 for every single person who works for him. Of course, he was immediately called a socialist. Right? He was immediately lambasted by a lot of people, and they said he will go out of business so quickly. And instead, he found his productivity went way up. Obviously, people wanted that job and they wanted to stay there. And a lot of people liked what he was doing for his employees, and they brought their business to him. And his revenues, I think, tripled in a first year or so, and he had to hire more people. Now, people might think now, and this is true, we don't know how it's going to turn out now because of COVID-19. Like a lot of businesses, he lost a lot of business, about 50% of his revenue. And they could see in March, this was coming down the road, this is not going away. And he actually got with the employees, and they all worked together, and they found a couple $100,000 or $1 million, I forget the number, of cost savings to help the business. And then all of these employees also, they weren't living hand to mouth anymore. They weren't living week to week. After he'd made this change, they had an increase in their 401ks of 155%. So they were much more comfortable financially to weather the storm as well. And they all volunteered to take pay cuts of varying amounts, I guess, depending how much they make, because some were making more than $70,000. And the story that I read about, I guess it was April, a couple of months ago, was that it allowed them to at least stay in business for another 2 or 3 months. They were covered. I don't know if that's still going to happen, but they were able to not have any layoffs, to keep their employees, to keep in business. Now, COVID-19 is lasting for so long. I don't know how they will work. I'm going to follow this company and see. But sure, it surely shows how one person can make a huge difference on many lives. And I like students to think that as well. You may not own a company, you may not be able to make decisions of this magnitude, but the decisions you make every day matter.
Excellent. Well, listen, we better end it there, but I've been talking to Dr. Peggy Cloninger about teaching ethics and ethical decision-making and about the impacts of ethical decision-making on firm success. Thank you very much, Dr. Cloninger. This was very interesting.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.